Hi there. Let's talk about Andrew Tate. I wanted to make this for friends and family and families um, because I think it's an important issue. I think there have been some good videos out there. One is Allie Beth Stuckey's video. That's worth checking out. If I can figure out a link in the description, I will. But yeah, so I want to kind of give a short little podcast on it. I think I'm going to split it into two videos. The first one's going to be more about what's good about Andrew Tate, you could say, or what's appealing, to use Allie Beth Stuckey's word. And we're going to talk through that. If you're interested in his kind of conversion to Islam, quote unquote, you can check out this video from Alpha and Omega Ministries. It's by a guy by the name of James White. And you can find this as well. I'll link to it in the description also. He does a really good job of explaining what in the world is going on with his quote-unquote conversion to Islam, because that's pretty significant, I should think. But for this video, we're going to talk about the not-so bad stuff that Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate both have done. It's going to be hard to kind of separate them, but we're going to do our best. And this video hopefully won't be so, there'll be some bad language in one of the videos that I'm going to bring up, and just a bad language rating overall. Like I would rate this, both of these episodes R. The last one is a hard R. The account that I have up right now, Crab Crawler, this guy has done extensive research on the Tate brothers, and he's made it all public on his Substack. Really interesting work. A lot of it's just sickening though. And so a lot of it we're going to go through, and we're just going to play audio or video clips, but we're not going to really focus on images because the images just nobody should be looking at whatsoever, many of them. So we're going to skip by those. If you want to look at them, if you want to read through them, you can. There are also chats, private chats from the Tate brothers, from the various things that they have in group chat, and I'm not going to cover those as well, largely because there's images in those, embedded in those, of course, but secondly, this guy was kicked off Twitter, as you can see, which isn't a surprise. Like, a ton of people are kicked off Twitter, even now. I think he got reinstated around the time that Elon Musk took it back over, like when Elon bought it, but then he got suspended again. And from what I hear from him, he's saying that there's no reason for it. He never received a letter from Twitter, but I'm not sure if he means that he never got a reason, or if he never got a letter of this is specifically why, and this is who, and so he might be expecting more than they give out. But a part of the reason, I remember from my research about a year and a half ago, whatever it was, well, it couldn't have been that, it had to be half a year to a year ago, that the reason that he got kicked off was because it was uncertain how he obtained the video or the chats, and so that's another reason why we're not going to play them. But that's information for the second video. I just want to say that here first, because if you don't have a reason to watch this, then don't watch it. Like, if you know of no one who's kind of influenced by Andrew Tate, then yeah, just there's no reason to watch this. Yeah, but if you're a parent and you've got children who are being influenced by Andrew Tate, which if they're in public school they probably are, or just on the internet in general, they are probably being influenced by Andrew Tate. If you have friends that are influenced by Andrew Tate, or if you yourself are kind of like, oh, I like him, or I really dislike him and I can't understand why anybody would like him, this video is hopefully for you. The first part, I'm going to go over some of the things that make him appealing, like I said, and we will go from there. Okay, to start off with, I want to play this video by Paul Joseph Watson. Interesting guy. I've seen videos from him before. He makes good points, and I want to play it because he gives the pro side of the argument for Andrew Tate. So Let's see what he has to say.
And the top 10% of the class at high school are girls. Maybe if you spent more time actually educating and not brainwashing young men, more time giving them confidence instead of ramming identity politics down their throats, instead of ordering them to feel sheepish and contrite about being male, instead of re-educating and browbeating them for quoting Andrew Tate videos, they wouldn't be failing at school and they'd resonate more with you than him.
When you were at home, you were the man.
So his point basically is, if society in large, if school teachers, all the people who are upset about Andrew Tate, if they actually supported young men instead of kind of squashing them down, they wouldn't be listening to Andrew Tate. And I think that's largely true. I think that's a valid point. Let's see what Andrew Tate has to say. Again, whenever Andrew Tate's on the screen, it's likely that there's going to be some curse words. And I just can't help that. I don't have the editing skills to edit that out, nor the time. And the rest of the content that we're addressing is already R. So it didn't make sense for me to try to do that. I also can't go full screen because with Game Bar, which is the Windows 10 thing, I just can't figure it out. I don't know why. When I go to full screen, it just exits out of the video. But sorry about that. But yeah, we'll struggle with it together.
Man of the house, and when you weren't home, your wife adopted your mindset and she was the woman of the house, and the children spent a lot of time around you listening to you and how you think and how you feel. But now we have two parents, both have to go to work. The kids are left on their own, either watching YouTube and all its bullshit or going to school and all its bullshit. Like, a lot of parents have very little influence over their children anymore. The Matrix has influence over their children. The Matrix is raising them.
Save me the sanct.
Okay, so Andrew Tate's point is pretty simple. Parents, they're away, they're working two jobs, or they're divorced, both of which we have incredibly high rates. If you go around some of your cities, if you pay attention to notice all the daycare nurseries that we have in the West, like, it's fairly obvious it's a huge booming industry. And parents will happily go and work full, 9 to 5 days for a double income to live in a nice house and send their kids to a nice nursery and live on the promise of sending them to a nice college. Don't know why you would do that anymore. It doesn't make much sense to me, but that's another issue for another video. But I think, again, I think his point is valid, and we can address some of the statistics later on in another video. But for now, just even if you don't agree with the argument, that's the argument. And a lot of people, like me, would say, yeah, that's absolutely fair. He's got an absolutely fair point. That's why, one of the reasons why a lot of things are wrong. Families have been broken up and are crumbling. I don't really know anybody who would disagree with just that statement, like families are crumbling. Even if you just put it like that, families are crumbling, then I think you've got enough room to agree. The little reference to the Matrix is what this video is going to largely be about, what it is, what Andrew Tate says it is, and kind of seeing if there's any merit to that claim. But we have a bit more to listen from this guy.
Sanctimonious crap about Andrew Tate being responsible for radicalizing a generation of young men. It wasn't Andrew Tate who triggered the crisis of masculinity. It wasn't Andrew Tate who removed healthy masculine role models from society. It wasn't Andrew Tate who taught young men to be broken, apologetic, spineless and hopeless. Andrew Tate didn't just appear out of a vacuum. He's a symptom of a culture that vilifies men. A culture that you created.
A symptom of a culture that vilifies men, a culture that you created. Speaking of feminists and the people on the left is what this guy is referring to, who this guy is referring to, and he's about to prove his point here with a video. But I think that's fair as well. To say that Andrew Tate's responsible for this is just ridiculous. There's no merit for that. Like, to say that he's the source of anger and frustration on behalf of younger generations, or men in general, or women in general. Yeah, no, that just doesn't work. It doesn't hold up, because he didn't come onto the scene until fairly late into the culture war kind of scene, if you want to frame it like that. Jordan Peterson came in long before him, and Andrew Tate is kind of seen like a replacement Jordan Peterson by many people. So let's just play the video. I've got some more comments on the kind of men, women, left, right divide, but we gotta wait a second before I get into that.
Observe the immediate innate reactions people give when asked what women are good for compared to what men are good for.
What are women good for?
Everything. Everything.
What are women good for?
Literally everything.
What are women good for?
They're good for everything.
What are men good for?
Nothing.
What are men good for?
What are men good for? Oh, not a lot, I don't think.
What are men good for?
Oh God, I have literally no.
What are men good for? Do you think men are important?
The smile and the look she gave him. Okay, so first thing about these videos, whenever you see them, even if they're by channels that you like, the selection pool is very selective. So as you can see from this one, they're in a city, they're in a not so very nice place. Cities are majority liberal wherever you go. If you look on election maps, just go on to New York Times election map by county, and just look at that map. You'll see like the hubs of liberalism in America are all the cities. And so if you go to a city and ask these questions, you're going to get liberal responses, and you don't see all the people that they cut out of this video because they're not entertaining enough. And that being said, however, yeah, these people are out there, and these people are in cities, and these people are people, and they think this. And it's, you know, I think, ask some people that you know, like, first of all, I object to the phrasing, what are men good for? And there are several reasons. Okay, so Jordan Peterson did a video, well, he was in an interview where the woman asked him, are men necessary for society? Something like that. And he responded brilliantly. He was like, what do you mean, are men necessary? Of course they're necessary. They keep society going. They're working these insane hours. They're up on the skyline, or up on the skyscrapers. They're down in the sewers. They're keeping this whole thing we know as society, which is a miracle, alive. It's amazing. Jordan Peterson's position is it's a miracle this works anyway, and it's, you know, the hefty labor is on the backs of men, on the shoulders of men. They're the ones doing the hard jobs, and he's right. Statistically, you can't argue with that. And it's a brilliant video. However, I just object to the framing. Like, are men necessary? What are men good for? Implies that people exist for utilitarian purposes. Like, I don't exist for the good of society. I exist to glorify God and enjoy Him and love my family and love others well. And yes, that means I will be good for society, but that I do not exist for the good of society. And that's an important differentiation that we need to make as Christians. We need to say about these questions, no, we approach it from a different framework altogether. So I think that's an important note as well. But back to, that's a digression, an important one, but a digression. So ask your friends the same question. Like, what are women good for versus what are men good for? I think, depending on who you meet on an average day, it'll vary, but you'll find people who, natural response is, what are women good for? Everything, of course. And what are men good for? And you kind of have crickets, like this guy.
It's in society.
The
Well,
sigh.
I guess
It's sad that the question of are men important can't be answered with a simple yes. What message does this send to young boys when society says they're good at nothing?
Great
Observe
question,
how young
great
men
point.
are portrayed on television. One of the UK's most watched TV soaps, Coronation Street, millions of viewers a week, is running a storyline where the young man concerned about his country, his identity, his role in society, tries to set off a truck bomb. Then another...
Okay, I should say this guy's centered in England. However, even I first listened to him back in America. So I came across this guy before I came over here. So yeah, I should say that. He's speaking from a British context, but it applies to both. What he's about to say is going to apply to just the British, but I think it can be carried over to America as well. But
A character who dares to suggest that young men are genuinely feeling this sense of disenfranchisement is similarly dismissed as a nutter.
Our country's under attack.
It's a nutter.
Like the fact that people are trying to take away what it means to be British. There were more morals then. There were more opportunities for people like me.
People like you? Like what? Like white, you mean? Is that what you mean?
Max, this is wrong.
You can't just brush away the
Okay. People like you, people like white. Man. So that is spoken about somebody saying, "Ooh, you know those times, back 300-400 years ago, those were better times. People had morals then. People, actually cared for one another. You had a society built on high trust. You could trust people. Like you didn't have vending machines. You could put snacks on the roadside, and you could say, hey, put in £1 for a bag of chips or whatever, and people would just take a chip for £1. A pound is basically a British dollar, and you still have that in some places. I was listening to a podcast earlier. They were saying in some towns there still exists this. It's fading fast, but okay. So the idea that oh, you mean people like you, and assume that that's based on race is ridiculous. And to say that with British history the way it is, Britain spent 1/5 of its GDP to buy back all the slaves in its own country from the slave owners. 1/5 of their GDP, and then they sent ships down to stop the slave trade around Africa and in the Mediterranean. They did everything possible. They sacrificed their own lives to undo or to stop a sin in their own country, and then to try and stop a sin that was worldwide. And they were the first country to do that. And it's insane that this view can be held. It shows that we teach a very poor understanding of history, especially here, if that argument is gaining traction, which sadly it very much is. And I think this is one of the best countries in the world. And one of the big reasons is that this country, England, was one which ended the slave trade first and tried to stop the slave trade in many, many other countries, and gave the lives of their own people and to the cause. And so if you don't understand why they spent 1/5 of their GDP freeing the slaves, well, it's because under Western law, if you make a law, you can't go back and say, okay, everybody has broken this law because we just made it and you broke it in the past, so we're gonna fine you for what you did last Tuesday, even though it's this Thursday's law. Yeah, that doesn't work. So imagine like the government comes out today and says chewing gum is illegal, and anybody who's chewed gum in the last 10 years, for every piece of gum you chewed, you're going to be fined $10. You chewed 1,000 pieces of gum, you owe the government $10,000. That's ridiculous. That's not fair. And so as evil as slavery was and is, the way to start a civil war is just to say to everybody, oh, just release your slaves and go on as normal. Britain did it so that their society actually kept going, and there wasn't a civil war like there was in America. And so yeah, they did it logically. They did it better than any country has, period, I think. They did it in a, considering that it's kind of like Josiah's Reformation. Not perfect, but towards the goal from a very, very dark and bad place. Anyway, yeah, so again, that's what we're faced with, and that's the position of a guy like this who looks at Andrew Tate and says, well, he's part of the reaction to this kind of thing, which is largely true.
this very real sense of disillusionment that young men in the West are feeling by blaming it all on Andrew friggin' Tate. It existed long before him and will continue to exist no matter if you lock him up and throw away the key. Andrew Tate isn't the source of the problem. The disparagement of masculinity and the othering and debasement of young men is the source of the problem.
Okay, we're going to stop the video here. The othering and debasement of young men is the problem. Okay. First of all, to call the culture war, well, first you can debate whether you should call the culture war a culture war or not. Basically, what I mean by culture war is that the culture, how people relate to one another, how people think about themselves, etc. People are vying for how people think about that. People are vying for that culture. And they're coming at it from very different places. And there are a bunch of sides, and people normally split it into left and right. In America, it's very Republican versus Democrat, or you could call it deep state versus, you know, normal liberty-loving people. You could say that. And that's just how a lot of people think about that. I'm not going to specifically give my opinion because I think I'll give my opinions, but I don't want to, you know, stop somebody who agrees with Andrew Tate from listening to me because of another opinion, or doesn't like Andrew Tate to stop listening to me because I sound like I'm on his side. And I'll get to that in a moment. But lost my point there. But basically, to divide it down the lines of men and women, to say that it's a culture war on men or a culture war on women is an issue, because it's not. It's a culture war on family. And to say it's a culture war on men or a culture war on women only is to miss it. It's to already lose the battle. I believe the culture war is about eliminating the way God intended the family to work. In a lot of writings by people who started this whole thing, that's their express intention. If you read BLM's purpose statement, it was to destabilize the nuclear family, I think it was, or eliminate it altogether. I can't remember. You can find it somewhere if you want to. And that's the stated purpose. That's the stated goal. It's not just against women, and it's not just against men, or it's not just against men and for women. It's against both, the way that God designed them. And so you can say, like, oh, I'm for men, and then have a completely different way of going about that than what the Bible says. You can be a feminist and say, no, I'm lifting up women and I'm putting men down, and I'm doing it for the good of both men and women. Well, that might be just to be very generous. Well, that might be true in their mind, but it is not true objectively, and it is not good objectively per the Word of God. And we'll get into that, but the point is to frame it as a war against men and a war for women. I think destroys a lot of what we're trying to hold on to. We're trying to hold on to good relationships between men and women, and those are quickly falling away from us because, yeah, it's dialectical synthesis. You put two views against one another, you take men and you take women, and you pit them against one another, and you get a synthesis of a society, a new way of thinking of things. And what we want to do is say, no, God has designed this, and God will decide how we relate to one another in civilization, as families, etc. And so, yeah, that's very few people, even theologians that I follow, understand that. Very few people will constantly be emphasizing that this is a war on both men and women. It's not just a war on men, and it's not just a war for women, or not just a war against women, however you want to frame it. But I want to do that because I think that's absolutely true. I'm going to end this here because it's already long, and the next video where we will talk about the Matrix and deep state and all that stuff. And I'm going to try and help explain again why he's got appeal and why he's got standing on those issues, Andrew Tate. and we're going to go from there. But for now, let me end this, and we'll pick back up in another video.